And how that manifested with me was about once or twice a year, I would get super sick and I would throw up for about anywhere from 8 to 13 hours straight. My body is very prone to throwing up, and I would not stop until I was basically emptied out. The question is, are you ready?
I'm ready, but I'm asleep.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the TGS, the Gospel Podcast. I'm your host, Kieran Smith, and today we are going to be talking about something I'm relatively excited about. I got my lovely co-host, my wife, behind the camera. You guys will not be seeing her today, but that is not the subject at hand. Yeah, I had to say it.
Yeah, every time now, every episode.
Yeah, so we're starting something new, babe, right? Yeah. We are out of generational data. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of sad. I liked it a lot.
It was getting really interesting and juicy.
Yes, it was. But before we go any further, let me tell you guys, like, comment, subscribe. Check this video out because what we're going into next is near and dear to my heart. I know it's very near and dear to my wife's heart. It's something that we often deal with in our day-to-day lives with people, with ourselves, and we have been seeing probably hands down, right, one of my favorite podcasters, right? This is near and dear to his heart as well. I don't think it's a secret because I'm pretty sure I have just been outright blunt and ended a ep like I'm going to watch The Basement.
Yeah, it's not a secret.
Right, yeah, so it's not a secret. Tim Ross is one of my favorite podcasters. I've also been watching Tim Ross long before he was a podcaster. Oh, yeah. So, great pastor. His sermons are awesome. If you've watched Tim preach, if you know, you know. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to go into details, but we know that mental health is very important to Tim, as well as other, there's not a whole bunch, but there's a couple of pastors that I pay closely attention to. Again, not a lot, but you know, that I've seen them talk about mental health, mental illness. I think it was last year. It might have been the year before last, but I think it was last where Tim did a sermon series called Peace of Mind at Embassy City, and he had a couple people come through. I know. I think Dan Lynn was there, or Dan Liam. I hope I'm not saying his name wrong, but I've seen him. We'll say Dan. He's a buff Asian dude. So I'll recruit by saying that, but he really is buff. Like you can tell, he works out. Yeah. But I've seen him preach a couple times, especially at like Gateway conferences and things like that. Tim Rivers was there. It was a couple of people that came through and dropped great messages around peace of mind, and it really was then where I was really wanting to go into like some type of mental health type of serious thing, but I was like, no, I don't think it's time yet. Prayed on it. Lord didn't tell me it was time yet. So I figured, okay, I must need some more time with, my therapist and learning, extra spots that I could touch on. So when I come forth, like, transparency is not a problem, which it usually isn't for me. No, I'm usually the one that's like, bleh. No. And my friends are like, that was a lot, but hey, let's see, I think I was watching something on, this was Pillar Church's YouTube. Okay. Yeah, something with Tim and Preston. And they had made a statement about like vulnerability, and someone has to go first. Yeah. And most of the time when I'm talking with people, especially about life, personal issues, mental health, mental illness, problems they're dealing with, they don't tend to want to go first.
That's a problem.
Yeah. So I'm always like, I'll do it.
Yeah, all the time. Pick me. Ooh, pick me.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to start jumping into. It is going to be a mental health, self-care, series. A couple episodes we're going to do. Mental Health Awareness Month is May. It starts May 1st, right? Yeah, so that's right. We just got into April. Mm-hmm. So it starts May 1st. And I wanted to do this last year, but things were just crazy. I didn't have the space and time. I was more prepared last year to do it around Mental Health Awareness Month, but it just got crazy. Yeah, so it wasn't time yet. So here we are now. And we're going to do it in a couple of different episodes. We're going to kick off with self-care, which that's what we're going to be talking about for a little bit tonight. And then it's just going to be different topics as we go along. The month of April will look very different than the month of May. Yeah. We'll probably lightly touch on some mental health topics, self-care topics, topics about community and how beneficial it is to not isolate yourself. And then in the month of May, because it's Mental Health Awareness Month, we'll go a lot heavier and deeper into some statistics, and we'll have some biblical references we can go off of, and it's going to be fun. Oh yeah, I see you behind the camera.
Sorry.
My wife said therapy. Yes, we're going to talk about therapy.
That's the first word. Spiritual world.
Because we love therapy around here.
Yes, we do.
We love therapy. All right, so self-care. So here's how I decided that we should kick off. Talking about our historical view of what we thought self-care was.
Right.
Babe, this is not a joking matter. Be serious.
Sorry. You started it. You're a whole pastor just being harassful during a podcast.
Yes, but I am just a Christian first. So, our historical view of what self-care looked like. So, historically, if we talk way before therapists, right? A marriage therapist and an individual therapist and sometimes group therapy.
Yeah.
What I thought self-care was, self-care, like the term self-care, was never really brought up to me. But I would hear people say things like, I'm going to treat myself, or I deserve to treat myself, right? Or I deserve this, or I'm going to do something for myself. Yeah. Normally, this was attached to some sort of monetary value in a way where I'm going to buy myself a gift. Yeah. I'm going to take myself to the spa. I'm going to buy myself a new car. I'm going to pamper myself a little bit. I'm going to go on a shopping spree. So these are things that I guess you could say self-care. That was my scope of self-care. That's what I kind of grew up around, in that type of environment. If someone was self-caring for themselves, it meant that they was buying something or they were treating themselves to something. So that is the definition of self-care I kind of grew up with.
Right.
For the majority, I would say, of my life. What about you? What about your first interaction with not your first interaction, but historically, like before you were ever introduced to any type of self-care or even heard the term, like growing up, what did you think or saw what self-care was?
So, although I grew up in therapy, as like having therapy as a kid, I still had no idea. So if you asked me as a child and someone took me in the room, I would consider it basically taking time to myself, whether it's going to the beach, relaxing, sunbathing, just somewhere where there's peace and subtleness around me.
Right. Like a small vacation or a getaway.
Yeah, a getaway.
A getaway. Okay. Yeah, so those are some historical views of self-care that we both have. And in the past, when we've spoken to other people about it, similar.
Yeah, very similar to yours. A lot of people, like, I'm going to take myself out to eat, I'm going to go to the movies. Like, a lot of people do stuff like that, and they claim it makes them feel good. Right. There's more to the story.
Yeah, definitely. There's more to the story. So, my first encounter with self-care. Therapy.
Yeah.
Therapy, like, hands down. Like, first time I heard the term, right? The first time I got a true definition of it. And I think, like most people who don't have a concrete therapeutic definition of self-care, when it's first introduced to them, they're like, huh?
Yeah.
Right? So there's been some people who I've had the fortunate blessing of being able to counsel, walk with, disciple in some way, shape, or form, and bringing self-care up to even these individuals.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I've gotten the response like, what self-care? What is that?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do? What do you do? How do you care for yourself other than eating and taking a bath and you know what I mean, getting dressed? Which have literally been fascinating to me because some of them have been a lot older than me. Not necessarily that matters, but just when I get responses like self-care, like I don't even know what to do for myself.
Yeah.
And it's like we know what to do for ourselves, but when you really like kind of like focus in on it, then it seems like this intimidating term because it's just not something it's talked about a lot more now. Yeah. But historically, it wasn't something that was talked about.
No, it wasn't. And it's also because you can hear about it and you could be in positions and places where it's mentioned to you, like, you know, therapy or going away to like a facility. But when your mind is absent, that means nothing to you. Because then again, you don't know what you get joy out of either or what can bring you peace. Yeah,
absolutely. I think the first time my therapist brought up self-care to me and explain what it was, I'm pretty sure my first reaction was, okay, what? You know, like, because the way she was kind of putting it out there, it seemed like something that I should have known.
Right.
And something that I guess to some extent I thought I was doing. But when she presented it to me, it was like it was something that was completely absent in my life, right? Yeah. So as we begin to talk about it, I began to realize like, this is something I might not be good at, right? It took some time to realize that, like for instance, with something like Sabbath, which I've gotten better at, but I mean, my first year in seminary, we talked about this. I had to take a class called the Ministerial Person. And it was in that class where I took an assessment to kind of gauge where I was at ministry-wise with, you know, certain things that you're doing, whether it's being discipled or how you're handling your time in ministry and how often you're participating in certain events and what have you. And at the end of my assessment, I got pretty good scores across the board. I was pretty leveled, but Sabbath was horrible. Remember when I told you that? Yeah. And you weren't surprised.
No.
I was a little bit kind of like, really? I thought I was okay with that. But as I had more mentors in my life and spiritual authority, I learned quickly like that was a weakness for me, like being intentional with my Sabbath.
And you know what's fun? What's very interesting is my first encounter with it was basically watching you and your therapist, because we're pretty open with each other, you know, about everything and transparent, and what you learn, you like to help me go through it too. And it's like that was the first time I really understood what self-care was, and it blew my mind because I thought that I've been doing it in certain ways to a certain extent my whole life.
Yeah, plus you've been to like 100 therapists. So when you said that your first encounter was with me and my therapist, I was just kind of like, really? That's not good. After having been through so many therapists. But yeah, hands down, my first encounter with self-care was therapy. And as my therapist began to explain it to me, what I got from her was that essentially, and this is, I guess you could say this is a therapeutic definition, but essentially self-care means a conscious act people take in order to promote their own physical, mental, and emotional health. Some even secular therapists and psychologists will add spiritual as well in there, right? So when my therapist really started to introduce this to me, I was taken back by it. One, because it's a conscious act. So it's something that you're intentional with. It's something that you have on your mind. I did not have on my mind, what could I do today or for the rest of this week or the days as they come that could ease my stress, ease my anxiety, make me a little bit more stable, keep me calm. Those weren't things that I intentionally thought, Right. It's because And I think it's because the busyness of life. Like sometimes as long as you kind of go to the gym and you work out, you think to yourself like that is my self-care, that's my outlet, right?
Yeah.
But eventually your body gets so, and you definitely release hormones, you definitely have a release, you definitely feel better physically and emotionally and mentally after you work out. But there still are other things that need to be done in order for those effects, I would say, to be lasting.
Yeah.
Because once you come down from that workout, you know, if you've done nothing else for your mind, for your spirit, for your emotions, it could be like a high, essentially.
Yeah, only for so long.
Right.
Yeah.
So when my therapist was explaining this to me and how it's a conscious act, that's when it really was something that started to be of interest to me, because I just thought to myself like, wow, so I have to consciously think about what edifies me, what keeps my mind stable, what keeps me calm, you know, what keeps me not high strung.
Yeah.
And at first that was a challenge. That was a challenge, especially my first year in therapy, like not even maybe the first 3 to 6 months, you know, just like trying to figure out what does this look like and why is this necessary?
Yeah.
Right.
How can it benefit me?
Yeah, because depending on what, and that's another episode for another day, but depending on your cultural background,
Yeah.
self-care or resting could be deemed as lazy.
Oh yeah, very easily.
You know, it could be deemed as, you know, what do you need that for? You could do self-care on the weekends.
Yeah.
You know, you could do that on a Friday night. Like self-care is something that should be done every day,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of the time. So I thought that was an interesting point, even though I didn't know that, but I'm pretty sure the viewers will think that that's interesting, that you have been to a lot of therapists, and I heard you say you're not crazy.
not
Come on,
crazy.
babe. That's because
being harassed.
stop
No,
it.
okay.
I know you know that that's not true, but
Yeah.
I'm saying that in a sense where it's like so much interaction with therapy,
Yeah.
and it's like self-care was still very foreign to you, you know. So I thought it was interesting that your first interaction or introduction to self-care was what I began to tell you about my therapist.
Yeah, and you know, I feel like, you know, therapists don't speak it upon it at all. Like, as many as I've been through, as many as I know people that have been through it, that is not a question that is asked at all. They're so focused on the history and, like, you know, moving forward with from your past, that they forget that self-care is a detrimental part of healing.
Yeah.
So that's why they don't bring it up.
Yeah.
But some
Yeah.
therapists, I feel like, and I'm not going to say all, because I see some therapists that have a really good, they take good self-care, like care of themselves, but then some, they lack. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, therapists need therapists, right?
Amen.
My therapist has a therapist.
Yep.
That's why she's a good therapist.
Oh, yeah.
So what I realized the lack of it caused, because at first I didn't realize there was a lack.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that lack caused anything. I didn't think it was causing anything. As I began to learn about self-care and what it looks like, you consciously doing things to make sure you are mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually healthy. What are those things? Things that build you up.
Yeah.
You know, like for myself, a daily prayer life is essential. You know, conversations with God are essential. My therapist is essential.
Yeah.
Marriage therapy is essential. Going to church is essential. Serving in godly community is essential. Having mentors and spiritual authority is essential. You know, working my body out physically is essential. My eating habits, having stopped eating meat 10 years ago. That like, and it's not like not eating meat is essential, but my eating habits are essential.
For you,
Yeah.
they are.
You know, how much time that I spend outside,
Yeah.
you know, is essential for me. So there are some things that I need to do daily and weekly and monthly
Yeah.
in order for me to remain stable. So now that I understand the value of self-care, hands down, is priceless.
Amen.
Like, it's priceless. There's no price that you can put on self-care. There should be no such thing as I don't have time to do whatever it is that involves self-care, that makes me better, keeps me stable, keeps me focused. I'm not high strung, right? Like, I would say a person is in a dangerous spot if they're saying things like, I don't have time for self-care.
Yeah, they are. They're in a very dark spot, I would say.
Which was where I was at. So now I know, what did the lack of it cause in my life? Mood swings, being snippy. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it, but I would say that was more stress related.
But you don't think that lack of self-care causes...
Sure. Like, definitely. We can talk about it. Like, I'm all about it. Like, and you know I love to gross you out especially. So I'm cool with that. But yeah, like, problems with your stomach. So some people have ulcers. I think I had at one point extreme, like, IBS. You know, so... And how that manifested with me was about once or twice a year, I would get super sick and I would throw up for about anywhere from 8 to 13 hours straight. My body is very prone to throwing up, and I would not stop until I was basically emptied out, and I would have to go to the doctor. Urgent care usually, which urgent care is a nightmare, but anyway, we love you urgent care people. But I would have to get a shot in my buttocks because they would give me dissolvable pills for nausea. I would take the pill, it would dissolve, and I would throw up. What was I throwing up? I don't know, but I would throw up.
Nothing.
Right. Yeah, usually after 12 or 13 hours of me throwing up, I wasn't throwing up anything except maybe bile, you know? So at that point,
it was horrible.
I would have to get the shot, and maybe 2 to 3 hours later, I would finally stop throwing up. But that happened to me once or twice a year for about, I want to say 5 to 7 years probably.
Yeah.
So yeah, that lack of self-care caused that type of ailment in my life to where for a couple of years, you know, I just had horrible stomach issues, you know. Being extra snippy with people, extra irritable, everything bothers you, things feel magnified, everything is stressful, everything's overwhelming. It feels like your cat's head's falling off. It's like, everything feels so magnified, you know what I mean? And so overwhelming. You just feel like you're sinking, you know, or you're being swallowed. And the lack of self-care, like, it was, I don't want to say it was so low in my life, because I think I had a very small amount of it, but it was probably like a spoonful. Like, I was going to say a teaspoon, because it really was that small, right? That's why I always felt like that. Like, having migraines, you know, for lots of years. Yeah, man, just like bad acid reflux, especially when I was really young, you know, like it just like constant stress. And learning things from my therapist, I realized, like, man, like, I didn't want to believe all of this was stress related and just due to lack of self-care, but it turned out it was.
Yeah.
So as we started to talk about self-care more, what did you realize the lack of it, man, like what manifested in your life due to the lack of self-care when you finally learned?
Let's see.
I would be like, babe, what you doing? Sleep.
Honestly, you know, seriously, you know, I love taking naps anyways, but it could go from like 8 hours of sleeping and then 8 more hours on top of that until you would get home sometimes. And it would be like my body was like so overtired that it could not stay up. I was like fighting, you know, like a baby does when they're, you know, trying to fight to stay awake.
Yeah.
It was horrible. It was that eating, you know, I didn't overeat, but I ate anything like chips, cereal, like all processed food and stuff that I would think it would alter my mood as well.
Yeah.
Very much so. I think at times it can cause me with the constant sleeping and not really having a life and then eating so horrible. I also had like I could have an attitude at times.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Which like to my point, the snippiness.
Yeah.
the extra irritability. Like everything irritates you. Everything makes you mad. It's like something happens and like you just lose it, you know? And I can remember times in my life, like whether it manifests through crying or you punch a hole in the wall or you just throw something or someone. You know what I mean? Like it's like it manifests in so many different ways. So from it, because there's a lack, right? We know that there's consequences, and we have already talked about some of them. So that was the last point that I wanted us to touch on, was some of the consequences of not practicing self-care, right? So I'll name these off. I'll name off a couple of them. We got consequences of not practicing self-care. So we have low energy, feeling hopeless, less patient, increased headaches, stomach aches, other physical symptoms of stress, difficulty falling and staying asleep, challenges in choosing healthy food, and urges to eat comfort foods. I didn't even read that part.
Really?
No, I didn't. Like the challenges in choosing healthy food, I'm like, wow. And that's just from lack of self-care. Worsening mental health symptoms like depression or anxiety, feeling burnout, difficulty concentrating, strain or distancing in the relationship with your spouse or partner, less patience with your children, reduced performance at work, less motivation to engage in social activities. And it's no surprise that when we neglect our own self-care, it catches up to us.
Oh, yeah.
Did I not have a conversation with someone about this a couple days ago? Telling this person that you can't keep eating bad processed frozen foods, sleeping 3 to 4 hours of night. You're no longer going to the gym. You're no longer doing Bible study. You know, you're in a huge transition. No. Like what you're doing is not wise. And I literally had to tell that person that, because it's great to go to work and to put your all in. But if you're doing those kind of things behind the scenes, it's only a matter of time before at work you are performing poorly. Like it's only a matter of time. Diminished sleep, poor diet, mood swings, can't think straight. Like all of the above going on, right? Diet is adding to this, right? Worry is adding to this. A transition is also adding to this. And I'm thinking to myself, you have to go back to what you were doing. That's exactly what I told that person, right? What makes you feel better? What helps you concentrate, right? What motivates you? What builds you up? What puts you in a better mood, right? You know you feel better when you go to the gym. You know you feel better when you talk to your therapist. You know you feel better when we have weekly Bible studies. You know you feel better when you're constantly at church. All of those things for that particular person are considered self-care. And they have to be extremely intentional with that. So for someone, if it's, I have to make sure I walk around my block, my neighborhood for 30 minutes. At some point, I like to sit down with a book for an hour. Maybe it's not the Bible for that person, but they like to read for an hour. They like to make sure every night at a certain time they have at least 30 minutes of devotion time, right? They like to make sure that at some point during the day they have a slot and spot that they can talk and commune with God and make sure that they're praying and they have a close relationship with God, like they're seeking that closeness, right? These things all can be self-care for one person. They might not be self-care for you, or all of them might not check the box of self-care for me, but for someone else, they might need all of those things in order to be stable, in order to be focused, in order to be not high strung, you know, not worried, not anxious. The best that they could possibly be. And those things they have to be extremely intentional with. Like they can't be things that just fall by the wayside because things start happening in life and it's like, I don't have time for it. Make time for it. We make time for what's important to us, right? So we say we don't have time for something, but we have time to get to work an hour and a half early, and we have time to leave work 2 hours late. but we don't have time to go to the gym anymore. We don't have time to do Bible study. We don't have time to go to church. We don't have to, and then you wonder why after so long, you know, now you lost time to read your books. Now you don't have time to go outside and ride your bike anymore. And you wonder why after so long, you just hate your boss, you hate yourself, you hate your life, and you're like, why am I not dead yet?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and then the onset of depression comes in.
Yeah, for some it goes further and it's suicidal ideations and stuff like that.
Right. But this is the start, right?
Yeah.
And this is why I said, and as we spoke, we came together and we agreed that this was a good starting point, because this right here is a term that seems so small, but if it's lacking, or there's a lack thereof, or if it's just non-existent in someone's life, right? You're not being wise, you're in a dangerous position, and you're going down a path where you're going to either hurt someone else or hurt yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And self-care it's probably one of the earliest signs, lack of self-care, that you're heading down a dangerous path.
Yeah.
Because you could just someone can lack on their self-care for 15 years and still kind of seem okay. But then they're going, and then boom, crash and hit a wall.
Out of nowhere.
Right? Like all of a sudden they have a massive anxiety attack,
Yeah.
or pains in their chest to where they think they're having some type of heart attack, right?
Yeah.
And it's all of that stuff built up, and yet it's stress. It's stress. It's stress. And I can't wait for some of the topics we're going to talk about. I'm trying so hard not to spoil them, so we got to end this. Well, I
just wanted to ask you one question.
Yeah.
Since we're ending it. So when it comes to self-care, until you really knew and understood it and started to walk that out, would you say that before then you really have not experienced that peace that surpasses all understanding? It came to
before I understood what self-care was. Absolutely. Absolutely. Before I was not, like, now I've been in therapy for years.
Yeah.
You know that. And I'm not going to say a lot. Like, I haven't been in therapy 15 years, because that would put me at a decently young age, but not too young. But I just haven't been in therapy that long. But still, I've spent a couple of years in therapy. Yeah. And I've said this to you often. Before I was where I'm at now, there were points in time where my mind and my body didn't feel like one. Maybe my mind's over here and my body's here, but they didn't feel like one. And things were always very dark, and most of the time very loud, right? And that was because I wasn't doing anything to soothe my soul, not spiritually, not emotionally, not physically. Now, and I want to be clear, because it's not like I became a Christian when I started going to therapy. I was a Christian before.
Oh, yeah.
I was a Christian long before. Well, they might not all know that, but that. I was a Christian long before I was in therapy. But that's the reason why things like, I tell you, like Preston Perry talks about this often, like Jesus in therapy. Some people say theology in therapy. Again, I always say I'm fully aware that Jesus plus nothing equals everything. Yeah. We know this already. But nonetheless, I was a Christian and I still felt like that. Right? And this is another episode for another day, right? But I definitely at times had people saying like possibly something was wrong with me because I was a Christian and I was feeling all of these things.
Oh, we're gonna get into that.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So before I understood what self-care was in therapy with my therapist, I did not experience not any bit of peace. Okay. Not even a small amount of peace. Yeah. I was able to portray I had some sort of peace, and it was very temporary. It was peaceful as long as I was cool. Somebody did something, that peace went out the window.
That conditional peace.
Right. So it was not any type. If someone would have talked to me about a peace that surpasses all understanding when I was like 27, I would have been like, you're just not telling the truth.
Stop lying.
Yes, like I would have just not, I would have been like, that doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it's not for people like me. So just stop teasing me. Like no sort of peace. So that was a good question because you are absolutely right. Before therapy and understanding what self-care really was and how to execute it, no, I did not have much peace, if any at all.
Okay. Thank you for answering. It just came to me because I was curious.
Sure, babe. You cute enough.
Better.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I really hope you guys got something from this. Self-care is important, man. You matter. Your self-care matters. You're not going to be able to keep running and running and running. Please do not put 110% in at your job. And then once you're done with work, you have nothing for your family or for your spouse or for your children. That's not what God wants for you or your family or your friend circle or anything like that. You should work with an excellent spirit. You should do everything you do if you call yourself a Christian with an excellent spirit, and that includes resting. You should rest with the excellent spirit. Resting is biblical. Time to yourself is biblical. Refreshing yourself is biblical. So please take care of yourself. Do what you need to do to make sure your mind is stable, that you are calm, that you can think straight. You know, you're not high strung. People get fired for things like that. Sometimes we can cause our own bad situations just because of lack of self-care or none at all. So we love you guys. We hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned. The next one's coming in. It's going to be good. Peace.
Later.